Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me warmly welcome all of you to the second OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference, which was jointly organized by the Austrian OSCE Chairmanship, the OSCE Secretariat Gender Unit, and the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. It is really a great pleasure to see that so many have followed our invitation to join us for the next 2 days when we will review the OSCE's work in the field of gender equality. A particular thanks goes to all of those that have traveled from far and joined us from all across the OSCE region today. But now, without further ado, I have the honor to invite Her Excellency Ms. Sophie Karmasin, Federal Minister for Families and Youth in Austria, to open this conference with her remarks. Your Excellency, please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure today to speak in front of you and to open this important conference on gender equality. 3 years after the last event, it is now time to draw a balance and look ahead on how to work in future. The OSCE has many commitments on the topic, and gender equality has become an important part of the OSCE security approach. In OSCE Action Plan of 2004, the key document is the key document around which the conference here is centered. And the Action Plan starts with a quote from the United Nations General Assembly resolution. The peace and welfare of the world require maximum participation of women on equal terms with men in all fields. When we speak of gender equality and women's rights, we speak of fundamental rights that affect all areas of life. We all agree that the OSCE itself and the participating states have the responsibility to realize gender equality on all levels, from gender mainstreaming in the work environment to the prevention of violence against women. The realization of gender equality is a characteristic of a modern and peaceful welfare society. And we have to fight for this kind of peaceful and just world. And women can change a lot. We only have to let them participate to contribute. Gender equality is a long-standing priority for Austria and an essential part of our policy agenda. We are actively engaged in numerous international organizations and projects to drive forward this topic. And as Minister of Families and Youth, I work hard to promote family friendliness and gender equality. Our strategy is to provide important impulses for modern frameworks like childcare services, better financial support for families, and more family friendliness in Austria's companies and municipalities. The aim is to make Austria the most family-friendly country in Europe. And I strongly believe that family friendliness paves the ground for gender equality. And in this context, the participation of fathers is crucial, and therefore we have introduced several new instruments to increase the number of fathers taking parental leave. In Austria, parents have since March, parents who share childcare equally receive an additional bonus of €1,000 extra additionally, the so-called partnership bonus. You know that from Germany, kind of. Furthermore, fathers have the possibility to take 1 month of work to spend time with the family right after birth. In this period, they receive the so-called family time bonus, including €700. This stimulates mothers and fathers to take care of their children together. And we focus on stimulating fathers because gender equality can only become a reality if fathers actively engage in child care. But of course, this is not the only topic that aims at reaching gender equality. This year we have also introduced a new childcare allowance account, which was implemented to allow parents more financial flexibility. And we have extended the capacities of the national childcare system. And we have motivated companies to take on a more family-friendly approach by joining in a company and community-based network. But furthermore, women's participation in the economic sphere must be a high priority for all of us. In Austria, a third of companies are currently led by women, but only 7% of management positions in the top 200 leading companies are done by women. Studies have shown that the economic inclusion, you know all that, economic inclusion of women is fundamental to increase growth and profit. Austria aims to encourage women to take on leadership positions through concrete measures. One of the main important ones is the introduction of a gender quote for supervisory boards. Another area we need to work on is that of women participating in political and public life. Even today, the number of women in parliament, as mayors, as politicians, or as heads of state leaves much to be desired. And we must define steps to take us forward instead of back. Even in times of crisis, it should be a priority to guarantee equal accesses and participation in political and public life. Let's come to the topic of violence against women and the role of women in conflict. Austria engages actively in promoting and protecting the rights of women during conflict, but also focuses on furthering their role in conflict resolution, prevention and management. Let me underline that gender-based violence is a phenomenon that is not limited to one culture, to one religion or social class, but has many shapes, and we must combat this. Activities in the field of education, victim support and gender mainstreaming are needed. And in the effort to step up security and peace, the OSCE should lead by example at improving the participation of women in peace processes. International coordination is vital. As a network and by exchange, we can drive gender equality forward on all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, during the 2 days of this conference, we have the opportunity to discuss all named issues and many more, which are needed to take further steps to move us towards the goal of global gender equality. Let us listen to and learn from each other. While women make up half the world's population, they must not be marginalized and excluded from exercising the same rights as men. Equal rights and participation for women is an essential contributor to stability and security for all. I'm convinced that this conference will identify a new way forward together in order to achieve societies in which women and men are fully equal in all spheres of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Karmasin. In order to make progress towards gender equality, we also need strong champions. One of the champions who has shown particular leadership since his taking office is unfortunately not with us in person today, but has nevertheless agreed to address our conference. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada.
Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes chers amis. Je tiens d'abord.
Good morning, everyone. I would first like to thank the OSCE for organizing this conference. Also, thanks to all of the people present here today for your work to build a world where men and women benefit from equal opportunities.
Strides to advance women's rights, but in 2017, we need to do much more. From violence against women to workplace discrimination to unequal access to education, gender inequality is still a reality around the world. We all benefit when women's rights are respected and when women are protected from violence. We know that women's leadership and equal participation in the workforce lead to significant economic gains, along with so many other social and community benefits. And we are stronger when girls can grow up and realize their full potential as leaders, peacemakers, entrepreneurs, and citizens of our world. So I thank you for working hard every day to make gender equality a reality, and I challenge us all to work even harder to build a world where our daughters and all of us can truly thrive. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. We will now hear opening remarks by the representatives of our partners in this conference. First, the floor will go to Ms. Katarzyna Gardapkhadze, First Deputy Director of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, followed by Ambassador Paul Bekkers, Director of the Office of the OSCE Secretary General. Let me also take this opportunity to say thank you to our partners for the hard work that you have invested in this conference, and thank you for the excellent cooperation. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, on behalf of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this second Gender Equality Review Conference. I would like to join Jürgen in thanking the Austrian chairmanship, colleagues from the OSCE Secretariat, but also my own able team for many weeks of very hard work to prepare this conference. My appreciation also goes to all of you for joining us here today. I am glad to see this room full of women, but also full of men, as gender equality is certainly not just a women's issue. I very much appreciate the presence of colleagues from the OSCE field operations who continue to carry forward the OSCE mission, even in very challenging times. I also appreciate the participation of our experts from the capitals, colleagues from OSCE delegations, international partners, and civil society activists. Gender equality and women's rights depend on us joining efforts today. Gender equality is not a soft issue to be treated as a second-class importance thing. Ensuring equal rights and opportunities for women and men, and for different groups of women and men, is essential to achieving a more peaceful, prosperous, and democratic OSCE area, as we stated in our own OSCE Gender Action Plan. Societies thrive when women and men feel safe and respected and are provided with equal rights and opportunities to participate in all spheres of life on an equal footing, including in democratic governance, decision-making, and in the security sector. Political participation of women and men is crucial to effective democracies. In simple terms, democracy means the rule of the people. Yet, women continue to be underrepresented in governing structures across the OSCE region, and particularly in decision-making positions. We can hardly refer to democracies when half of our population can be excluded from public affairs. OSCE participating states have committed to provide specific measures to achieve gender balance in all legislative, judicial, and executive bodies, including security services such as the police. It is time we take stock of our achievements, strengthen our efforts, and take concrete steps to meet international standards on gender equality. And let me maybe add a personal note. I hope this conference will not be just words, but it will be a call for real action. We have observed progress with regards to women's political participation in the OSCE region. In 2002, around 15% women participated in political life. Today, the average is about 27% in national legislatures. But there are still OSCE participating states, including a number of EU member states, when the percentage is around 10. Progress, while existent, has been way too slow, with profound effects of democracy. Some used to say that if we maintain this pace of change without any further active intervention, we will receive gender parity in OSCE national legislatures only about half a century from now, and we cannot certainly wait this long. ODIHR works actively to promote women's participation in politics, elections, and in the security sector. We work across the OSCE region and with a wide array of actors, including parliaments, women's parliamentary networks, political parties, the law enforcement, and civil society to advance participation and inclusion of women. We facilitate and support legislative and institutional changes, knowledge sharing, and capacity building for advancing women's representation, role, and influence in politics. In line with our mandate, we have developed several tools to highlight the issue of underrepresentation of women and to present ways how the male-dominated landscape of politics and public life can be effectively changed. We stand ready to support the OSCE participating states in making use of our knowledge and expertise. Only 11% of women who experience sexual assault actually report it. This equates to a massive gap in the provision of police services and other services to victims of domestic and sexual violence. ODIHR works to strengthen national mechanisms for the advancement of women as well as to prevent and combat gender-based violence. We also support OSCE participating states in implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda and women's full involvement in maintaining peace and security. We work to integrate the gender perspective into the security sector and its oversight as a means to ensure women's meaningful inclusion. And we also work to address the security needs and concerns of men, women, boys, and girls. We place special emphasis on strengthening women's leadership and networking, as well as promoting the rights of women from groups that are usually not well represented, including those from Roma and Sinti communities or women with disabilities. I am particularly pleased that a number of these women activists are also with us here today to share their important views and expertise. Women's civil society groups are particularly important to democracy as they continue to defend human rights and speak for those whose voice is not heard. The space for the women's movement across the OSCE region has been tightening in recent years. A number of OSCE participating states have attempted to silence women and stifle their human rights through limitations on funding sources, undue financial controls, and intimidation. Governments' attempts to curtail women's reproductive rights or dismiss sexual violence against women have been a source of massive women's protests. Despite all the challenges, the women's movement across the OSCE region continues to protect and promote human rights and democracy for us all. We shall not let the women's voices be silenced. In the challenging world of today, we must strengthen our support to women's organizations, and I would say, again on a personal note, that the time is now because it seems that both the need has grown and the impetus for women to organize themselves has strengthened as well. We must continue to support gender equality, women's rights, and women's participation across the OSCE participating states, across political lines, across religious lines, across any lines. Women's rights are crucial to human rights, democracy, stability, and prosperity in the OSCE region, and we must not allow these rights to be compromised. ODIHR will continue to support participating states, women's organizations and movements, and networks of women's leaders in their efforts towards achieving actual de facto gender equality and gender parity for the benefit of all. For today and tomorrow, I suggest that we do not stop at praising ourselves and each other, but rather evaluate our progress critically and assess what remains to be done. I hope that we will engage in frank and constructive exchanges, consider good practices and lessons learned by others, identify concrete steps forward. and also agree on joint action, perhaps. Or maybe this is a wishful thinking, but I very much hope we will. I hope that this conference brings new knowledge and new energy to all of us to continue doing our important work on gender equality and women's rights. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Minister, honourable members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, dear Katarzyna. Again, good morning. Let me first state that I really liked what the Minister said, and congratulations on being or having the ambition to be the most family-friendly country in the world. And I really support what you said about Europe. Sorry. What you said about the position of fathers, reaching gender equality, childcare. I think we have to make big progress, so thank you for those words. Thank you, Master of Ceremony, Jürgen. I'd like to return my thanks on behalf of all of us in the Secretariat for the good cooperation organizing this conference, also together with ODIHR. Ladies and gentlemen, I do speak on behalf of the Secretary General, who, as many of you know, is now in Central Asia, amongst others for the Expo in Astana. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. The second OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference offers us an excellent opportunity to reflect on progress since the adoption of the 2004 OSCE Gender Action Plan and our first Gender Equality Review Conference of 2014. I realize I'm the last of three good speakers, actually four, including Prime Minister. So what I'll try to do is not to repeat what the Minister has said and Katarzyna has said, nor the Prime Minister. What I like to do is to look back on the things that have been achieved and look at the challenges ahead of us, which I think is more important. So I'd like to address four achievements, specifically 2 points of where the organization needs to improve in my view, and lastly I'd like to mention 3 areas that we, the Gender Unit, the Secretariat, have identified as a priority for the way ahead to achieve the necessary progress. So as you know, the Gender Action Plan tasks the OSCE to improve our internal structures and mechanisms. One important achievement, that will be the first of the 4 I'd like to mention, has been the establishment of a gender focal point network across the OSCE executive structures, which consists of over 60 gender focal points who support their departments to systematically gender mainstream their policies and activities. A second point I'd like to mention is that we have seen a significant improvement in gender balance in the organization since 2004. We moved from 35% of women professional staff members in 2004 to 49% in 2016. Third achievement. Every year there is a clear increase in programs and projects that are gender mainstreamed across all 3 dimensions. For example, 2016, the amount of projects reported to have a gender component in the political military dimension doubled compared to 2014. Fourth achievement. All of the OSCE executive structures have stepped up their work to assist our participating states with the implementation of the gender equality commitments. For example, last year we organized a National Action Plan Academy on UN Security Council 1325 on women, peace and security in order to improve practical implementation in 15 OSCE participating states. We had a very good meeting organized by the Inclusive Security from Washington, and I must say I have very good memories of the panel I was honored to be part of, together with Ambassador Swanee Hunt. And on the issue of combating violence against women, and the Minister mentioned it this morning, We have intensified lots in the last year with a focus on supporting the OSCE participating states in collecting and analyzing data and improving national systems for prevention and support for survivors. However, at the same time, and I quote Katarzyna, who said, let's not only praise ourselves over these 2 days, but let's look at things we need to improve. I'd like to single out 2 points, if I may. Generally speaking, I must say, we're just not going as fast and as systematic as we all would like to go. And again, I'd like to mention 2 things. First and foremost, the organization has not been able to produce an update of the Gender Action Plan of 2004. It's a good plan, ladies and gentlemen. Mira, good to see you this morning. You did a lot with your team to implement the actions as identified in the Gender Action Plan. But it is 13 years ago. The world has changed, things have changed, and regarding gender, thank God, things have changed for the better in many areas. Now, all we need to do to keep track of that and update our Gender Action Plan. 13 years ago, it's time to update. The second point I'd like to mention is the fact that although women's representation in senior management has improved drastically from 15% in 2004 to 27% in 2016, we're still miles away from reaching parity. For example, I'd like to mention the special monitoring mission in Ukraine, where we're struggling to attract female monitors, with their number actually dropping from 17 to under 15%. How come? SMM simply is not giving candidates, female candidates, to be a monitor. In other words, there's a lot to be done ahead of us. Now, coming to my last point of my presentation, to do things, to achieve things, to achieve progress, we need to make priorities. I'd like to identify 3 priorities, 3 areas that kind of summarize the activities ahead of us. One would be, we need to apply gender equality principles throughout the work of the organization. Second point would be, we need a systematic approach to gender mainstreaming. And thirdly, we need to broaden the support base for gender equality within the OSCE. Let me elaborate shortly on all 3 points. We follow the recommendations of the 2014 Gender Equality Review Conference 3 years ago, and have taken and will take further measures to apply gender equality principles throughout the work of the organization. In April, the Secretary General approved an implementation roadmap which will guide all departments in the Secretariat to systematically integrate gender into their work and report on their results. Momentarily, 7 field operations, including the SMM to Ukraine, have a mission-specific gender action plan. More support will be provided to increase that number in the years to come. Secondly, in order to turn gender commitments into action and achieve meaningful results, we need a systematic approach to gender mainstreaming and transformational leadership. This year, we will introduce gender coaching for OSCE senior management. This program, originally developed for the Swedish Armed Forces, supports the Secretary General, my colleagues, myself, senior managers in mainstreaming gender issues through improved approaches to leadership and organizational change. And my third point, we need to broaden the support base for gender equality within the organization. In this regard, I'd like to mention the OSCE Men Engaged Network, chaired very well by the Slovenian ambassador. Ambassador Benedict is here with us this morning, which is playing an important role in mobilizing men to take an active stance in support of equal rights between men and women. Because it's needless to say, it's pretty much all about men. So, in conclusion, yes, we are making progress, but there's a lot to be done. And this review conference presents us with a good opportunity to identify creative solutions to address the remaining gaps and challenges. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, our donors, the USA, Switzerland, Finland, and Austria, that have made this conference possible. Allow me one last remark as a final comment. While we focus on what we need to do to implement our gender commitments and how we need to do it, we should not forget the reason why. Gender equality, apart from being a matter of human rights, is a prerequisite. It's a precondition. It's an imperative for achieving and maintaining peace and stability in the OSCE region. I thank you.
Thank you, Katarzyna. Thank you, Paul, for your opening remarks, which I think were very helpful in terms of already setting the scene for our further discussions here. Thank you very much. As the largest regional arrangement under Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter, the OSCE has a central role to play and an important contribution to make in addressing the comprehensive aspects of women's and men's, girls and boys' human rights and security. At the global level, we have recently seen major developments with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, including the targeted Goal 5 on achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls. It is therefore with great interest that I'm looking forward to the remarks by United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Lakshmi Puri.
Distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to address you today at the second OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference. The General Assembly's and the Security Council's resolutions on sustaining peace, adopted in 2016, have demonstrated a shift in the mindset and strategic priorities of the UN member states. Grounded in international human rights laws and standards, the resolutions committed to ensure that sustaining peace is based on the people-centered approach of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They also emphasize that inclusivity is key to successful efforts to prevent, resolve, and rebuild from conflict, and is closely allied with the OSCE's own human dimensions approach to security. This approach ensures a central role for women. Inclusivity means adherence to the 2030 Agenda's pledge to leave no one behind and reach the furthest behind first. In this regard, the role of regional organizations is of utmost importance, and these principles are critical to all women, and in particular those facing unique and intersecting challenges like women with disabilities, Roma women, and poor rural women, who must be brought forward and recognized as critical agents of transformative change. They cannot and they will not be left behind. Also, the magnitude and complexity of global security threats, crises, and intra-state conflicts that frequently spill across borders has made the development of regional approaches to security management, peacemaking, protection, and prevention ever more critical. The UN Secretary General has identified prevention as his #1 priority. His vision for the UN connects our efforts for peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, not only in words, but in practice. He has called for a surge in diplomacy for peace, an overarching commitment to conflict prevention across the UN's peace and security, human rights, and development pillars, while identifying new elements that would contribute to enhance mediation capacity, especially for early engagement that would contribute to conflict prevention. For both the 2030 Agenda and the Sustaining Peace Agenda, gender equality is the vital ingredient. If an enabler and beneficiary, if women are not at the negotiations table and don't play key roles in decision-making after a conflict, peace agreements are unlikely to be sustainable. And it's a proven fact. Women often lead dialogue processes to stop the slide into conflict and to build consensus after war and reconciliation. More women in our police and military make for more effective institutions to ensure our security. Women's participation improves operational efficiency, reduces corruption, diminishes sexual exploitation and abuses, and increases trust between authorities and civilians. And this is in addition to being a human rights and just thing to do. Over the years, the OSCE has carried out essential work to support women's empowerment and rights protection. The OSCE Action Plan for the Promotion of Gender Equality was a visionary and exemplary document. In 2004, it recognized that the full and equal participation of women and men is key to achieving peace, prosperity, and stability. This second OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference is now happening at a crucial time, and I commend you for gathering to review the implementation of that plan and to consider how to enhance the fulfillment of the gender equality-related commitments in the OSCE participating states, as well as within OSCE structures. So please put the Agenda 2030 into that. In 2015, the global study of the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 recognized the efforts of the OSCE and other regional and sub-regional organizations to integrate women, peace, and security commitments in their security, crisis response, human rights, or peace-building efforts. Being the largest security organization in the world, the OSCE has therefore played a leading role in gender mainstreaming security issues, policies, and programs. This, including through supporting the adoption of national action plans for women, peace, and security, encouraging women's participation in political life, facilitating the development of jurisprudence on women's rights, and engaging with women's organizations to strengthen early warning systems, a key part of prevention. But the analysis also shows that the implementation of gender equality agenda, including peace and security, remains uneven. With its comprehensive mandate, the OSCE can accelerate implementation of the global, regional, and national commitments at all levels. The OSCE and UN Women are working together to assist countries and women's organizations develop and implement national action plans on women, peace, and security. These plans provide blueprints for comprehensive reforms to support women's greater participation and protection in all areas. Hopefully, the OSCE could soon adopt its own action plan on women, peace, and security, as other regional organizations have done. UN Women is also actively cooperating with the OSCE on the advancement and adoption of gender equality legislation for the region. Together, we have supported legislation to combat human trafficking, domestic violence, as well as to ensure accountability in cases of conflict-related sexual violence. The OSCE and ODIHR have been instruments in lending technical expertise of draft legislation from the international human rights perspective, and to ensure that gender is mainstreamed through new laws and policies. In closing, let me emphasize that despite all progress, women continue to remain unrepresented and underrepresented in peacemaking and conflict prevention efforts worldwide, including, unfortunately, in the OSCE area. Special measures are therefore needed to ensure the achievement of the goal of gender balance in all legislative, judicial, and executive bodies. The UN and regional organizations would help facilitate progress by investing in gender-sensitive conflict analysis and responsive conflict analysis, collecting more gender-disaggregated data, supporting gender-sensitive mediation, and developing professional gender-responsive management cultures and working environments. Meaningful and inclusive participation of women and their leadership is core to advancing regional organizations' commitments, including through the appointment of more women to senior positions and in the military security field. Comprehensive gender mainstreaming of policies, programs, and activities is also still needed. Threats such as violent extremism and terrorism, rising xenophobia, and climate change are affecting our security. UN Women values the OSCE's comprehensive approach to security, focus on effective prevention measures, and the protection of human rights. We welcome the close cooperation on addressing these growing security threats through joint and shared gender-responsive conflict and context analysis, and through joint consultations with women and civil society organizations, that core of inclusion, to determine sensitivities, threats, needs, and the capacities and roles that women can bring to solve complex crises and situations. Over the past decades, the OSCE has provided indispensable support to women peacemakers. Yet for women grassroots peacemakers, such support is not as accessible. Let us find solutions to make the work of women's organizations sustainable so that they can continue to tirelessly make gains for women's political empowerment, economic prosperity, access to employment, so that women continue to be at the forefront of maintaining peace, advancing conflict prevention, and mitigation. Working together, we need to ensure that the implementation of Agenda 2030 and the sustaining peace concept are focused on the empowerment, participation, and leadership of those who are often excluded, not on vulnerability or victimhood alone. True inclusivity and empowerment requires that those on the fringes are brought to the center to participate in all aspects of decision making, also because they will contribute the maximum. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us now turn to our first panel, which will be moderated by Ms. Bethany Bell, BBC foreign correspondent in Vienna. Before I hand over to Ms. Bell, who will introduce our distinguished panelists, allow me to make some brief organizational remarks. After the panel discussion, we will open the floor for comments and questions. Unfortunately, even 2 days offer only limited time, and should you have prepared statements, I would like to kindly ask you to please limit yourselves to key points and to recommendations. There's of course an opportunity to circulate every statement. It will be added to the conference documentation and will be taken into account when we follow up to our work. Also, for the sake of all participants, I would like to ask everybody when taking the floor to please identify yourselves with your name and the organization that you're representing. With this, I would like to give the floor to our opening panel and would like to invite our panelists to please join us on the stage. Thank you.
It's a very great pleasure to be here and to be moderating this distinguished panel. My name is Bethany Bell. I'm a BBC foreign correspondent. I'm delighted to have with me today Pirkko Hämäläinen, the Under-Secretary of State for Internal and External Services at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland. We also have Ambassador Mara Marinaki, the EU Principal Advisor on Gender and UNSCR 1325, Women, Peace and Security. We also have Senator Ekaterina Lachova, the President of the Union of Women of Russia from the Russian Federation. We have Dr. Hedi Fry, the Special Representative on Gender Issues at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and Adelheid Manzold, the Gender Working Group and Civic Solidarity Platform. They will be giving us some of their insights today in a number of different fields relating to gender equality. After that, we will have a short panel discussion and then questions from the audience. Now, from an outsider's perspective, it can sometimes seem that the good international commitments on the questions of gender equality are often failing to make the transition from paper into action. And in other cases where there are successes in implementation, those very successes are not being implemented in a way or communicated in a way that will allow other states to use them as a model. So where are we now? How much progress has been made? And how do we move from commitments on paper to more action? These are all questions that I would now like to put to the panel, and Pirko, you have the floor.
Thank you. And first of all, I would like to thank the OSCE to organize this review conference. In Finland, already for more than 110 years ago, 906, women got equal right to vote and to be candidate in parliament. Our parliament got immediately the first 19 female MPs in 1907. Over 90 years ago, the first female minister was appointed. Finland has had women as ministers of foreign affairs, defense, finance and prime minister, and in 2000 we got our first female president. All these women have been remarkable professionals and also great role models. The Finnish Act on Equality between men and women was first adopted in 1986 and later on amended several times. The Government Action Plan for Gender Equality, the latest from the last year, consists of measures concerning working life, equal pay, economic decision-making, reconciliation of work and family, parenthood, gender segregation in education and labour market, education, sport resources and library services, violence against women and intimate partner violence, and men's health and well-being. The action plan ensures that all ministries assess the gender impacts of their activities and take them into account in their decision-making. It has been equally important to enhance cross-sectoral cooperation in the society, including civil society actors. It is indispensable that both men and women engage in work for equality in a society. Systematic awareness building is utmost important. Education has been an important factor behind equality. Equality in primary and secondary education has become a norm in Finland. Now we have realized that it is good to start even earlier, already from early childhood and kindergartens. The programs in teacher education always include sensitizing to equality issues. The concept guiding almost every educational reform in Finland has been equity. Another important aspect in equality policies has been support to families. This includes maternity, paternity and family leave, child daycare system, early childhood education, school and after and preschool activities. The cost of parental leave has this far fallen mostly on women's employers, since mothers are still taking majority of the parental leaves. There is a considerable effort by the government to equalize the costs. Family leave has encouraged also fathers of small children to take leave. Public services are crucial for both parents to engage in working life and education. Affordable, good quality childcare is a strong mechanism for change. We have other good examples of well-functioning services. For example, providing school children with a warm meal during the school day may seem like a minor issue, but it can be the solution that allows both parents to work full-time. Through studies and experience, we have also learned that the sexual and reproductive health and rights are an important condition for women and girls to be able to use their full potential. These fundamental human rights ensure that everyone can complete education and gain a profession and contribute to economic growth. As mentioned, we have many good practices in gender equality. However, challenges also remain. One big concern is violence against women. This is one of the most serious human rights violations in Finland, and we are committed to working to combat and prevent it in various ways. We have increased the number of shelters, developed a permanent network of multi-agency risk assessment conference teams, and invested awareness raising and training materials for professionals in the field of social and health services and the police. Another challenge in gender equality is salaries. Despite the highly educated workforce, the gender pay gap in Finland is almost 17%. This is alarming. We must continue our efforts to ensure that there is equal pay for work of equal value in the public and private sectors. The panelists were asked also to present concrete recommendations on how to continue to enhance the work of the OSCE in gender equality. Equal opportunities, equal outcomes, and equal participation of women in all spheres of life is utmost important. I would like to highlight one aspect where the OSCE could have even further added value, and that is women, peace and security agenda. One of the biggest gaps in the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 concerns the equal participation of women in mediation and peace processes. Women's active participation and leadership is crucial in all parts of decision-making and implementation of peace and security matters throughout the conflict cycle. I look forward to an exchange of views on how the OSCE could improve these activities and show leadership in this regard. The OSCE, as the largest regional security organization in the world, should continue to pay due attention to women, peace and security agenda. The comprehensive security approach of the OSCE requires us to do so. I would like to highlight all the cooperation with Austria, Kazakhstan and Turkey to promote an OSCE-wide action plan on women, peace and security. This is noteworthy that 5 organizations, including the European Union and NATO, have already adopted dedicated regional action plans on women, peace and security. Yet the OSCE has not. I hope the discussions today pave the way for the OSCE-wide action plan. To conclude, I would like to thank the OSCE for the great work on gender mainstreaming. I also warmly welcome further initiatives on concrete implementation of gender mainstreaming. This conference provides a valuable opportunity for the OSCE to review its efforts to truly integrate a gender perspective into its activities and policies. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to invite Ambassador Mara Marinaki.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to extend my special thanks to the Austrian chairmanship for the initiative, to the Secretariat, Secretary General Zangé, and of course to all of you for organizing the second Gender Equality Conference 3 years after the first one. And we're all aware that the world is not exactly the same as it was back in 2014. It's even less similar to what it was in 2004 when the action plan has been adopted in the context of the OSCE. And this is an area where I would very much like to emphasize the importance of keeping up with the tide of the times on how every organization adapts to the needs and responds to what is absolutely essential for its relevance to continue to be constructively included in the political decisions of our times. From the side of the European Union, we have been extremely engaged on everything that has to do with gender. We don't identify women specifically, we widen the scope, therefore we speak about gender because we feel that it's not a biological determination, but rather a societal and political determination that's more important. And it is in this context exactly that we perceive now more than ever that gender in all its aspects is directly and intrinsically interlinked with security, peace, and development. And these are all areas where the OSCE has an added value and has an extremely valuable comparative advantage that should be put into better effect. I consider the opportunities that are offered ahead quite worth taking. And from our own point of view, we definitely see the complementarity of action as an important underpinning of our cooperation between European Union and the OSCE, but also between the European Union and all other organizations. These are not times where any one of us can afford to go ahead on our own. Therefore, we speak about complementarity and not about rivalries among the various international organizations, even more so when there is such a confluence of messages, as it is the case with OSCE, with this excellent wide array of mandates and competencies. And we see the merit of joining up our efforts in a context that would be mutually effective, mutually positively improving our prospects of being more successful than we have been in the past. And we speak on behalf not only of regional organizations, but also of international organizations. The United Nations itself admit that they cannot do it on their own, so they need all of us. And it is exactly in this context that from the European Union's point of view, we have come forward with two important strategies. One is the European Union strategy on security that has been adopted last June. And the second one, which takes the lead from the initial one, the overarching strategy on security, is the new strategy on resilience. And we define resilience in concrete terms as we consider that 1/4 of the world's population live in fragile states or societies. And we want to prevent these fragile situations from turning into new wars, new humanitarian catastrophes, or new refugee crises. And this is what we call resilience. And this is where, again, we see the merit of interacting together with the OSCE, as with all other regional and international actors, in bringing together this joint effort through placing particular emphasis on anticipation, prevention, and preparedness. We consider that the Agenda 2030, Lakshmi, Puri mentioned it a few minutes ago, Agenda 2030 is indeed extremely well placed in defining the terms of reference of this joint endeavor. The fact that nobody should be left behind is again an issue on everybody's agenda. And a cross-cutting, connecting thread among all the strategies and all the policies is the role for women. This is where we need to be inclusive, and this is where definitely we need to improve our track record. We cannot wait for 170 years for the gender pay gap to be covered. We cannot wait another day for domestic violence not to be on everybody's penal code. And we cannot wait for another day not to have all problems that have to do with sexual harassment, gender violence, sexual violence in conflict, child marriage, female genital mutilation, everything that falls under a category of unacceptable behaviors and where the toll is taken most heavily, if not solely, by women. This is where the OSCE should take the lead. I consider that the fact that OSCE is the largest regional organization, not only on security, but also on empowerment, on human rights, it covers a scope that no other international organization can cover. And it has such a large untapped potential that simply calls to be tapped. Please, don't wait a day longer, and you are not alone. The European Union is fully on your side. All of us are participating here. Some of us have spent many years of our lives in this room, and we really, really feel extremely strongly for the OSCE and its prospects. And I consider that it should be really a missed opportunity if the next years to come, and thanks to an excellent Austrian chairmanship, this would be an excellent incentive to start now and to be taken up by future chairmanships. There would be a new beginning that can start today. This conference that will be taking place today and tomorrow could set some concrete recommendations, concrete initiatives that need to be undertaken, concrete goals that need to be fulfilled, and concrete timetables to hold everybody accountable. All of us have skeletons in our cupboards in our countries. Unfortunately, even the best of the lot, none of us has a perfect track record as far as gender equality is concerned. We very much welcomed the Icelandic example, Iceland, one of indeed the leading proponents on all aspects pertaining to gender equality. And nevertheless, you may recall a few weeks ago, all women in Iceland came out in the streets and stopped their work at 2:15 one afternoon because beyond that point they would work for free and they wouldn't accept it. It should set an example, and it should be used exactly to empower all of us on what we can do if we bring our minds together and if we see each other as allies and not as rivals. Again, I would like to underline that the European Union is fully behind the OSCE. We tend our hand and we look forward to working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mara Marinaki. I'd now like to ask Senator Ekaterina Lachova to take the floor, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, Russia shares the OSCE's approach whereby gender equality is seen as a vital condition for sustainable social development, and as is set out in the OSCE's Gender Action Plan, it helps to ensure comprehensive security. Russia has ratified the most important international documents on the situation of women, primary among which is the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Our country is guided by the Beijing Declaration and Beijing Platform for Action, supports the UN Millennium Development Goals and 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The principle of equality of men and women is anchored in our constitution, and today Russian legislation is the basis for developing gender-oriented and gender-balanced policy, taking account of the special requirements of women, people with family obligations, and aimed at protecting motherhood, fatherhood, and childhood. Russia's women educated and make up 49% of all economically active persons. Ever more women are entering business and female entrepreneurship is developing. Women now make up 43% of managers. Women are also over 60% of journalists at most Russian publications, and over 40% of all Russian academics are women. Women also head up 4 in 10 federal universities in Russia. Women are represented in the legislative and executive authorities, and nowadays women make up 18% of representatives in the Russian upper house and 16% of those in the lower house. The upper house of parliament is headed by Valentina Matvienko. Her job is the third most important in government. The deputy prime minister is a woman. Women lead 2 federal ministries, the Central Bank, the Russian Court of Auditors, and Central Electoral Commission. Our human rights and children's rights ombudsmen are also women. The proportion of government and municipal civil service roles held by women has now reached 72%. Ladies and gentlemen, in our country there are over 2,000 different women's NGOs. The Union of Women of Russia, of which I am president, I'm a senator, is the largest such network, bringing together 22,000 different women's councils. As well as this, 33 women's NGOs with various goals are part of our union. They hold the status of collective member. The Union of Women of Russia is associated with the United Nations Department of Public Information as a special consultative status at ECOSOC and is a member of the Associated Country Women of the World, Women's International Democratic Federation, and the International Council of Women. The programmes of the Union of Women reflect the requirements of Russian society and women in particular, regarding the development of democracy, maintaining the traditions and spiritual values of the peoples of Russia, strengthening the family and ensuring peace. We also prioritise the prevention of violence against women and rural and environmental redevelopment and revival. Today, Russia is working actively to develop presidential grants to support NGOs and to ensure transparency in competitive procedures. NGOs themselves are involved in their planning. The Union of Women has already been entrusted with involvement in project selection on 2 occasions, and we are currently very involved in this process too.
We have also a number of state programs in the country, in the social sphere, that directly impact improving the condition of women. And this year, we approved a National Action Plan for Women up to 2022. This includes measures in order to increase access of women to political life, raising women's economic status, improving health care for women, and taking action to prevent violence against women. The Women's Union of Russia, as well as other NGOs, have taken an active part in the elaboration and fleshing out the national strategy of actions for women. And as other women's NGOs, we have now become part of the government's coordination council in their work in implementing this strategy. And we believe that today this council has become crucial in implementing the national mechanism of improving the condition of women. Distinguished colleagues, now, the Eurasian Women's forum, which was headed by the chairperson of the upper house of parliament, Valentina Matvienko, and it has joined the National Mechanism on Improving the Women's Condition. Its first meeting was held in 2015 in St. Petersburg, based on the Interparliamentary CIS States Assembly. Now, in spite of its name, the Eurasian Forum brought together women from all countries and continents of the world, from 80 countries, and to ensure that women's organizations would continue to maintain contacts, to learn from each other, and to reach a broader audience. A forum also created the community portal for these women. And I would like to invite everyone working here today to join our portal, and also to invite you to the Eurasian Women's Forum in 2018. Dear friends, in conclusion, I'd like to note that, first of all, we are extremely grateful to the OSCE for continuing to raise the issue of the role of women in society and in the role of women in maintaining security. Today, women in Russia are very much concerned with the rise of mounting pressures in the world, the rise of terrorism and hotspots. But my country continues to be focused on creating a discussion on creating peace, on the role of women in this process, and to call upon all to respect international law and the diversity of the world. Only based on this approach will we be able to reach positive change. I am convinced that we women can make a positive contribution to politics to create more kindness, justice, and to help the peace process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Katarzyna Lakova. I would now like to ask Hedy Fry to make some remarks.
Chers collègues, chers amis, bonjour à tous. I want to thank the OSCE for making this a possibility today, and I also want to thank the Austrian chairman for making this possible. Hopefully, out of this meeting, we will eventually have a belated 2014 action plan at the OSCE. Now, I'm mindful of what the moderator said, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences and about the reality of the country I come from, which is Canada. I want to recall that it was in 1995 that we went to the Beijing conference and we talked about women's rights as human rights. At that conference, we also set in place a plan of action for Beijing +5 and Beijing +10. We have seen, in fact, that this plan of action has never actually happened in many countries of the world, and in spite of all good intentions, we are still behind and we have slipped in many areas in terms of women's equality. Now, there are two things I believe that is essential, and we have found that in our country. So, as a physician, I want to talk a little bit about evidence-based decision-making. What worked? What didn't work? In 1995, Canada went to the Beijing conference, and we brought with us a toolkit called gender-based analysis. Now, at the same time, we put gender-based analysis forward in our own parliament. And in fact, as a minister for status of women at the time, we tried very hard to ensure that every single department looked at gender-based analysis. And so I just want to talk a little bit about a tool that is essential if we are going to make a difference to women's equality, and that is gender-based analysis. What is gender-based analysis? Now, again, gender-based analysis means that you have got to take statistical data in your parliament and in your country of your people. You've got to find out, do sex disaggregated data, men and women, and look at how they are faring in every sphere. Now, if you find data, and I want to give you a quick example, we found, for instance, in Canada, that only 2% of women participated in non-traditional work, such as construction work. And yet, when every country decides that it wants to move forward economically, it begins an infrastructure program. And in that infrastructure program, 2 2% of women participated. All the rest were men. So the question then arose, why is it that women did not participate? It wasn't because women weren't capable, and it wasn't because women didn't want to. We found out that there's a simple basic reason why women didn't participate. To work in construction meant you had to have very flexible work hours. When the weather was good, you worked. When the weather was bad, you didn't work. And in that way, women needed to have childcare. Reliable, flexible childcare. That is what prevented women from participating in this huge economic development program in our country. So that was the first thing that we noticed. We noticed that men, for instance, many men did not go into nursing. Why not? Is it because men weren't nurturing? Is it because men didn't want to? And the question then became, yes, men wanted to. Yes, men can be as nurturing. But usually and traditionally, this was women's work. Women were nurses. Women were nurturers. And so we had to look at what the barriers were to men getting into nursing. And out of this, when you look at the barriers that prevent men and women from moving forward in order to get equal opportunity to participate fully in the economic, social, political, and cultural lives of their countries, you have to find out what those barriers are. And you have to use tools to move the barrier forward. Now, what are the tools that governments have? The tools that government have are 1, legislation, and 2, public policy. Now, we've noticed in most countries you have wonderful legislation. We had. But it didn't move anything forward. The Beijing Conference was 22 years ago. That's a long time, and we haven't seen that much progress. So good intentions, good ideas, action plans, legislation doesn't make a difference unless you have good public policy to back it up. And I want to talk a little bit about what is essential for good public policy. Political will. I'm very proud that my Prime Minister took the time to present to you a very short presentation this morning. But if you want to talk about political will, that was where political will happened in our country. He decided when he won his election he was going to have 50% of women in his cabinet, and he just did it. He didn't have to have permission, he did it. The second thing he decided was that his generation, he's 44, asked why he did this, he said, because it's 2017. Because it's time. Let's get on with it. Let's not talk about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Let's get going. Let's do what we need to do to make it happen. So political will is a very important piece. Not only is political will important, many of you here are from governments. Therefore, you need political will. Many of you here are parliamentarians. You need political will. Many of you are from civil society, and you need to be the fire that is lit under governments and parliaments to make them get that political will if they don't have it. So nothing will change if we don't have political will and if we don't have the tool. And I think the tool is gender-based analysis. And we need to move forward. Recently, our Prime Minister decided that to put, as we say in Canada, your money where your mouth is. He made some very important changes. Our Foreign Affairs Minister spoke up and she said, Canada is here, we're standing on our own 2 feet, we're going to do the things that we need to do to advance women's place in the world. And that was a commitment. Secondly, our Minister of Defense made a decision that we were going to look at 1325. We were going to involve women in every section of the decision-making with regard to conflict resolution, with regard to serving in the armed forces, and with regard to moving forward, and to respect women's role in those areas. Because in Canada, we were not so good. Over the last few years, we saw that women in the armed forces were subject to harassment by some of their superiors. They weren't welcome. And so now, he has said, this is not going to happen anymore. It's going to change. And the third thing is we have made as a basis for our development policy around the world as gender. Gender is going to be at the heart of it. We're going to look at how we help women in certain developing countries to be able to get a good secondary education as well as a primary education for many of them. Women need to be helped with the skills and tools that they need. Childcare is one of them. But getting women training, making sure that women are able to have access to education, and that single moms, women who have children and no one else to help them, that they have the ability especially because many of them are poor, that they have the ability to get to those skills and get those training and get grants to go to university and to reach their potential. Because, my friends, you all know it, we've talked about it, I'm not going to indulge in rhetoric. The point is, how do we move from paper to action? And I have just given you what we've done in our country to move from paper to action. And the two essential ingredients, one of which is political will, and the second one of which is gender-based analysis. Look at your statistics, see how women are faring and how men are faring, and if they're not faring well, why not? How do they participate fully? And how does government, good government, make that happen? And how does civil society play a role in making sure that governments do those kinds of things? And so I won't keep you any longer. I only have 5 minutes, and I think my 5 minutes is almost up. But I wanted to present a really concrete plan of action. If we're going to move, let's do it. Let's do it now, because it's 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hedy Fry. Put your money where your mouth is. I'd now like to ask Adelheid Meinzold to make some remarks.
Dear participants, I'm really happy about the occasion to speak here in the name of civil society. I'm representing the Civic Solidarity Platform, which is the umbrella of many civil society organizations, mostly based on human rights expertise in the whole OSCE area. And I have the pleasure to tell you that within the Civic Solidarity Platform, we have had yesterday, at the occasion also of this conference, our kick-off of a women's and gender working group in this field, and I think this is also a very good step forward. Personally, I'm also since a very long time involved with WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, a women's peace organization linking peace to justice with the founding mothers already in 1915, who were at the foundation also of principles for the United Nations and multilateralism. So, saying this, I think it is very clear for civil society that we are not asking just a favor, but we are committed to rights. The UN Security Council resolution was an achievement by strong commitment of civil society and, of course, especially through advice and advocacy and lobbying of women's organizations. The combined right to be protected from violence, including gender-based violence, the right to meaningful participation on all levels of decision-making and negotiations in all phases of the conflict cycle, and combine this with a confession to give priority to conflict prevention is a unique achievement. The implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda is an extremely comprehensive and complex task and requires a high responsibility and joint efforts, of course, of civil society, governments and institutions. And speaking here in the name of civil society, I must really emphasize that Women, Peace and Security agenda stands for substantial changes in political commitments towards conflict, and this partly is laid down also in global study done in 2015. Key elements of this are the creation of a gender-sensitive environment and, as you said just now, the public awareness for possible gains through inclusiveness. And, of course, this is also part of civil society responsibility our structural critiques of patriarchal mainstreams in our societies don't really make our work towards political commitments easier, and sometimes the tendency of marginalized women's groups, gender groups in the civil society area is a result of this. Just to take up some very interesting achievements linked to problems on countries from the OSCE region. Personally, I'm coming from Germany, and therefore I start with Germany. Germany has now voted on the second National Action Plan, which includes a regular and institutionalized operational exchange between a quite big alliance of 1325 from the civil society and the interministerial working group. As a result, this continuity of dialogue at the end of this period will have, of course, better tools for an evaluation of the achievements. This has not taken place in the first action plan, so we are kind of proud. A bitter pill is that substantial integration of women refugee issues, as I have really appreciated, especially in what you have laid down, that this is a priority in should be a priority in 2017, was until now refused by especially the Ministry of Interior in Germany. But we have, and this is also an important point, we have ratified very recently, pushed by civil society, the Istanbul Convention, and we know that also in other countries like Ukraine, this will happen, especially because civil society is pushing for that. Switzerland, the important study done by Swiss Peace and represented also in Warsaw and the Human Dimension meeting last year in side event, pointed out that the main issue is the economic integration, the economic focus for women. And this was, and the care work, the importance of care work as a re-evaluation, and this was done on a study especially focused on Bosnia, and I think this is also a very important step. Holland, the civil society has achieved to be integrated part in the whole process of drafting National Action Plan, and at the end has taken common ownership. This is quite new in this sphere. The bitter pill in this case is, and this is heavily controversial, I have to say, in the civil society sphere, the extensive use of 1325 also for military purposes. So I think this is something we have to mention. Serbia complains about a totally insufficient address of human rights violation from civil society, they see it like that, committed during the war, and of course then adequate measures to go further on with a strong women's involvement. Armenia, women's initiatives working very strongly on 1325. They are still waiting for a first draft of a national action plan. Until now, they told us that there are two parallel processes, which we all know have to go together. And I could continue with all the local and women's expertise from these countries. All in all, and this is my conclusion, the most competent trainings, the presence of gender advisors, local and international experts is an enormous achievement, yes. But we see from our experiences from the ground, from local women, that we always meet the same root causes of war and violence in different historical and cultural contexts. As long as we don't find adequate political answers to these, we are just working on symptoms and we miss our mission. This is the duty where civil society has to put the finger in the wounds. And yes, you all know that we are faced with strong backdrop of increasing militarism, fear, and shrinking space. And therefore, we know these problems, we have a lot of local expertise, and we are ready to support all relevant initiatives of the OSCE Gender Unit, the Gender Action Plan, with our expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Adelheid Meinsold, and to all of the speakers here, some extremely thought-provoking interventions. We are running slightly tight with time. I'm told we can go on till 12:10. I would like just to have a little bit of a panel discussion before I open up the floor to your questions. First of all, if I could ask Pirkko Hämäläinen, Finland has made gender equality one of your foreign policy priorities. What challenges does that throw up in practice? Are you facing conflict of interest in certain areas?
Well, a lot of challenges, I can say. But let's say, first of all, women's and girls' rights, they have been already on our human rights agenda for decades. And now one can say that we are level higher. It's now in the program of the government, gender equality and women's and girls' rights. And of course, it's the question of the society of Finland, but it's also a very important part of our foreign policy. And I think what is important is that we have international organization to cooperate with, to be part of the work of the international cooperation organizations. And UN is important, OSCE is important, EU is important. I think the work done there is already something that we have to work further together. And that is one very important pillar in our foreign policy. The second one is maybe one thing we do bilaterally, development cooperation. And even though the workload is huge, we have focused on certain countries and certain thematic areas. And for example, what we have found out is that investing on girls' education is really fundamental question in order to build up the society and enhance the society. The other one, which such an example, is to invest on, also to give support to women's entrepreneurship. And this has proven to be a similar kind of positive development in the society, because it gives also empowerment to women and show that they can do well in business. I think these are the very good examples. But also I think the role of the NGOs is important.
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry to cut you short, but we are under time pressure. Ambassador Mara Marinaki, there have been some recent studies which have argued that the best predictor of a state's peacefulness is how well its women are treated. How do you see the gender perspective in addressing security threats in the EU?
I fully agree indeed that one of the earliest indicators of an incoming problem in the course of a crisis should be the way women are treated, because essentially also in the rise of radicalization or of the various Islamic groups where we have had in recent months and years, indeed one of the earliest indicators have been that women were the first victims. So the way women are treated is a very good rule of thumb on how the countries feel safe on their premises and how they intend to proceed. We consider security an important underpinning of any society, and we consider in the same vein that women as agents of change, as positive agents of political improvement and of political inclusiveness, definitely merit to be a part of this equation. In the same vein, we have also heavily invested in the triangular relationship between gender with peace and security in the implementation of Resolution 1325, in the engagement with civil society and with the political parties for the political participation of women, all of them important parts. We have definitely put a special emphasis on the role of women, an increasing important priority on the role of women in early prevention and in combating radicalization at its earliest possible. We have invested a significant amount of money. I'm not sure we have been extremely successful, but definitely we could not tell how things would be if we had not done what we have done. So we keep on trying, and we look up to everybody else to work together.
Thank you very much. Senator Katarzyna Lakova, how do you think the political participation of women can be increased in Russia and the OSCE region?
Well, first of all, what I would like to say is that in many ways a woman's involvement in politics will depend from herself. She has to be a professional. She can't just be a woman. She has to be a professional if she's going to be involved in politics. And I think we have great development taking place in civil society and in women's civil society. Many people are reaching this conclusion. So we have a multi-party system, and we understand that today, at levels of representative authority, whether federal or municipal, we can only have the promotion of women when a woman is involved in societies, organizations, or a party. There has to be political will on the part of the leaders of those parties too, because mostly our leaders are men. And I'd like to give you an example. Our governing party in Parliament has a majority. The leadership of the party currently is made up of women to 40% of the membership is female. This is a great success. Now, in the upper house, we have 5 senators who are women, and in the lower house, we have 3 deputies who are women. So we had a bitter experience when we had a women's fraction in our parliament. There was a women's movement, and they started to stand alongside parties. They won 8%. But in the next parliament, we weren't allowed through. The men understood that the most responsible and active electorate is women voters. So we understood that women's charities now need to work together with the political parties. They need to know how to build dialogue. You shouldn't just take me because I'm a woman. I need to prove that I'm capable and that I know how to address a given problem. Thank you.
Very much. I wonder, you touched there on the question of political will. I wonder if I could bring that up again with you, Hedy Fry. You spoke about the importance of political will in implementing things in Canada. What tips would you have for other countries in developing that need for political will, or that desire for the change?
I think, sorry, I don't think this is on. Okay, I think that it's really important to realize that in most countries, I know in Canada, 51% of the electorate are women. And I think trying to be a productive nation and then trying to also be competitive on the global stage economically, you cannot do that if you have one hand tied behind your back. And if you don't allow for that 51% of your population to be able to be active in terms of productivity on the workforce, in terms of competitiveness within your structure, then you are trying to fight a battle with one hand tied behind your back. It is really important to recognize that women are essential to productivity because we make up 51% of the population, and that women are also essential to peace and security because women are different. Women think differently. We look at the world differently. We see problems differently, and we find solutions differently. So it's really important, if you're going to make good decisions, not just to have 49% of people making those decisions, but to have all people making those decisions, bringing the perspectives to the table that will make a difference. And I think that that's basically the argument. You can never be a successful nation if you're going to only engage 49% of your citizenry. And that's basically it. If you want to be competitive, if you want to be productive, if you want to be excellent around the world, then you're going to have to employ all of your citizenry.
Thank you. Adelheid Meinsalt, I wondered if you mentioned in your remarks the question of the shrinking space for women's groups, for NGOs. How much of a problem do you see that in this current climate of security concerns?
Thank you. Shrinking space is not gender neutral. I think this is a very clear thing we have to have in mind. And I want to add that we discussed it also yesterday in the Women's and Gender Working Group. We have to raise awareness about the vulnerability, but also multi-discrimination of women, but not in the sense of add a new argument to victimize women, but to give them the chance to, not the chance, to give, to realize the right to be present in negotiations and the possibilities also to be represented in the political sphere, in the sphere of conflict negotiations. We don't want to be protected by being sent back to our houses where you can close the door and say, now you are safe. No, this is not the human security we need. And we need our space, and sometimes this space might be a little bit different also of the space that men in some negotiations need, because sometimes we really have complex stories to tell, to exchange with each other, and we need sometimes more time and also a different, more trustful environment. And the last thing I would like to add is one of the biggest problems in our society is always money. We are clear that we have to move money from war to peace, and I think this is, women have to push for this. Thank you.
We have just a few minutes left for questions from the floor. I'm told we must finish at 12:10. I would first of all like to ask Professor, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Hijran Husseinova, the chairperson of the State Committee for Family, Women and Children Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan, to ask the first comment. I would ask all of you making questions from the floor to keep your remarks very short and on topic, please, because of our time pressure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we don't have much time, so I'll speak Russian since we have interpretation. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this conference. I would like to thank all of the speakers today. You touched upon some very important issues. I just wanted to say that for a long time we've been talking about what we should be doing. I heard this at the last conference, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it at conferences to come. But what about some specific, decisive measures that we should be taking in our countries? We haven't said much about that. What should really budge us from where we stand now? Many of our countries are facing many challenges today. The world has changed very significantly, and in this context we continue to say that we need to have gender equality in our countries. Today we have people from countries from different levels of development. Countries that have overcome conflicts, countries from the former Soviet area. At the same time, economically, they are different levels. We have many different processes going on in these countries. So the background is not very stable. But on the other hand, to develop proper strategies is difficult. For example, the national strategy we have in my country is also very important to move us forward. So this is very important. In Azerbaijan, we already have a national action plan. The only thing we need to do now is for the government to approve it, for it to be an official decision. So we've already gone through the processes of approving the plan through the NGOs and government structures. We already have mechanisms. What we need to do is to involve more people of the population, because a great number of the people in my country are refugees who were isolated from taking part in developing society. What can we do for them to be better integrated into our society? This is why we carried out a great deal of outreach in public relations. So now we have these people who are involved in parliament and other government structures. This is why my question is to all of the panelists here today. Do you think we can have one action plan for all countries? And what should the strategy be? Now, maybe it could be a special program. Now, everyone presented here, all the countries presented here today, have adopted the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. In the framework of that agenda, there is already a program for gender equality. Perhaps we can tie these things up together. And what could the role of the OSCE be in this process? And what specific proposals can we put forward? This is a question to all panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Before I ask the panel to answer that, I will take two more questions from the floor, please.
I'm Diana. This is thing on. Hi, I'm Diana. I'm from Austria. I'm here representing Voice of Diversity, a Romani organization. And oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, I'm Diana. I'm here from Austria. I'm representing Voice of Diversity, a Romani organization. And I'm a Romani myself. I'm here with lots of other Romani girls from all over Europe. And my question is, how much do you involve Romani girls and women in your own organization, teams, and so on? Because I know for a fact that Romani women are discriminated not only by society itself, like the most women are, but especially in our own community, because we are in a very strict patriarchal system, which was for me very hard because I was raised by my mom, and she was a single mom, and I was raised with a lot of women, and I suddenly was like thinking. So I want to ask you, how much do you involve my people in your organizations? Because I know for a fact we have a lot to tell you in our own words. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And one more question.
Hello, I am Tolikan Ismailova from Kyrgyz Republic, and I want to involve one main key request from our people from Central Asia, because migration affected each family, and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan is two small countries, and receiving countries, big Russia and big Kazakhstan, and we requested to support us to ratify UN Convention for Labor Rights by Russia Federation and by Kazakhstan, because we should think about our equal participation and equal, defend women and children rights, migrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to? Yes. Could I just query what your question was, please? Or maybe if we go with the questions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Could I? Yes.
Okay, if I can start. The first question, can we have the same action plan to all countries? I think that the countries are different from each other, and what we can do is to learn best practices from each other. I believe that that is the best way to go forward, but I think that there are universal kind of actions that we in all the countries can take. But I think that is something that should look from that point of view. And then I would say that in every country there are two important factors. The other one is that we need the role models, but we need the grassroots level work. Both are important, and government, parliament, they are having a crucial role in this project. And then about the Roma people, we have Roma people in the front row, I would say, in the work what comes to the gender questions, women and girls, and we have also women working in that sector.
Further to the points that Pirko has mentioned, to whom I fully subscribe, I agree that indeed there shouldn't be one model fits all kind of a policy for obvious reasons. Lessons learned are very helpful, but also regional action plans are extremely helpful. The European Union has one since 2008. We decided that it is completely outdated. We put it back on the drawing board, and we're in the process now of revisiting it and creating an EU policy on women, peace and security in the context of the 1325 implementation, which essentially covers all the points. I would suggest that it is an excellent initiative for the OSCE to go ahead and create an OSCE-wide policy on women, peace and security with main elements that are shared by all and that could very well serve to the individual, more tailor-made national action plans to facilitate the transitional process. On Roma ladies, there is a special unit, we have special projects, and we work extremely closely on this with the Council of Europe. Last point, Istanbul Convention on combating all forms of violence against women. The European Union signs tomorrow to accede itself further to all its member states to the Istanbul Convention. We consider it to be an important milestone, and we could invite everybody to join. I feel that it merits an international implementation for accountability and for political leadership to sign up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to join the words of my colleague from Finland with regard to the first question posed by the representative from Azerbaijan. I just wanted to say that, yes, indeed, to have one plan of action for all countries is very complicated to do. Everybody's different. Even in the post-Soviet area, we have many different countries. Civil society is being developed just now. If you look at European countries, for the past 200 years, they've been working in the system. It's much more developed than in our country. So we've looked at the experience of European countries, for example, where we've looked at gender issues there. We've looked at their laws. So I think that all of the international documents we have today, which touch upon gender equality, still is something we need to look at this good experience, and we need to use this experience, learn the lessons, and then adapt it in your own country. Now, with regard to the role of the Roma, well, today we heard some of the speakers tell us about the potential we can use within the OSCE, so we can look at issues of the Roma and the problem of gender equality. We could use the OSCE's potential in this matter. And now with regard to the convention, well, we have taken note that we should look into this. As the head of the Women's Union, I can tell you that I don't know this convention personally. I will have to study it and then consider this with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. With the clock ticking, can I ask you to... Thank you. I just wanted to say that while it's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all policy, women's rights are human rights. They're integral, they're basic, so that we do have one basis we can all talk about, and that is that women's rights are human rights. And so let's talk about the human rights of women, the right to work, the right to be equal, the right to have equal opportunity. Those are basic rights. Now, how we do it in our cultures is going to be very different. We're going to have to talk to women, we're going to have to engage civil society, we're going to have the political will. We need to do it. I know that at the OSCE, for instance, every year I host a gender luncheon together with the OSCE, and we bring women and men. Men are integral to this, around the table, and we talk about what's going on in each person's different countries and what are the challenges and the barriers that they face. Because if you do the data collecting, you can see those barriers, you can find out what they are, and then you can set about making good public policy and legislation. With regard to the Roma, we have some Roma in our country, but our country in Canada is a multicultural nation. We're made up of people from every corner of the world with different cultures, different languages, and different ways of doing things. But within our Constitution is a minority right that says that every single person in our country, no matter how small their group is, has equal rights. Those are rights that we must fulfill, and our Supreme Court upholds that right at all times. And the ability for women and men to come to find their rights within justice systems is done because we have something called the Court Challenges Project. And the Court Challenges Project means that if you're vulnerable and you cannot afford to pay for legal help, the government provides lawyers who will pay for that for you and take your case to court and make sure that you have equality under the law. So I think that's basically how we deal with it. Thanks.
And last but not least.
Yeah, strong multilateralism is a value in itself, somehow, and a lesson learned from wars and conflicts. But it is a value as well as diversity, and there is no contradiction, but this is complementary, and I think we always have to keep this in mind. Concerning in our realities, especially in the OSCE region, women's initiatives often are cross-border, and cross-border within national borders, but also especially between different ethnic groups, between cultural differences, but also and especially beyond the existing borders. And the patriotic wave we are facing at the moment, or new nationalisms, new borders are extremely counterproductive to this specific qualities also of women of cross-border work. So we don't need new borders. I would say we even have to tear them down. And this is a specific necessity in the question of refugees. As the quantity of borders women have to overcome on their way from where they have to flee to a shelter, which is often not really a shelter, is too high, and this is a political will. We cannot continue as we do until now.
Thank you very, very much indeed. I'm just going to take the last 2 seconds to say thank you very much to my distinguished panelists and for their very, very thought-provoking interventions, and to leave you all with the thought that it's 2017, let's do something.
Well, thank you very much indeed to our panel, and thank you for some very inspiring remarks. I think a lot of this will be taken up throughout our conference and further discussed. Before I would now like to invite all of you to join us for a lunch, which will be served outside this conference room. Please let me share a few points of information with you. First of all, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you all to a side event on women's health and human rights, which is jointly organized by the delegations of Denmark, the Netherlands, Canada, France, Belgium, the United Kingdom and Sweden, and co-sponsored by Switzerland, Finland and Slovenia. The side event is going to start in a couple of minutes in Bibliothekssaal on the 5th floor. I would also like to invite you to our marketplace on the 5th floor, where OSCE executive structures present their programmatic and project work on the implementation of the 2004 Gender Action Plan. The marketplace will be open throughout the entire conference, so whenever you feel like it, please go there, interact with our guests and share information with them. They will be happy to inform you about their work and experience. Since we started a little bit later this morning, we will only reconvene at 1:45 to also give our interpreters enough time to recover. Thank you very much. And we will reconvene in 2 parallel sessions. Working session 1 on gender mainstreaming, the conflict cycle, which will take place here in Neuer Saal. And working session 2 on women's participation in political and public life, which will take place in conference room 533, which is on the 5th floor. Finally, I would also like to invite you to join us at the end of today at a reception at Hotel Le Méridien, starting at around 5:15. The hotel is only a 5-minute short walk away from here. You will all find maps in your conference folders, and there will be colleagues waiting for you downstairs who will take you to the venue, and we're all very much looking forward to closing off this day with you in a more relaxed environment. So plenty of options. Please make a choice, enjoy your break, and enjoy your lunch. See you back at 1:45. Thank you very much.